Now, Google plans to provide high-quality, high-speed Wi-Fi facilities across 200 sites in Lagos as the search giant launched the Google station in Lagos. I caught up with Anjali Joshi, Google's Vice President for Product Management, and discussed how this move would drive development and more in Africa's most populous country.
What we try and do is we try and understand what services users need in terms of digital access, and we then do deep user research and we build products. So for example, let's talk about Maps. So we've launched Maps many years ago. It's been over 10 years since we launched Maps, and Maps was launched in the US, and it has evolved since then to directions, to satellite view, to street view, to a number of other features that we launched. And then not quite recently, but some years ago, we started looking at what were the use cases in new markets, and the new markets being like India, like Nigeria, and so on. Two things we noticed. One is that the mapping data is very poor. So people didn't have information on maps. So we spent a lot of time gathering information and adding it to our maps for many cities across the world. And now what we're trying to do is automate the process. We're using machine intelligence to actually read the images and the numbers on the street, so we can get actual information and recent information onto our maps for users globally. And our maps since then have improved a lot. And to go back to what do we do with developing products, when we start with, of course, understanding a user need, and then as people start using those products more, we know more about the features they need, and then we build.
What about some of those bottlenecks that you encounter? I mean, I know that you're trying to match the needs with what the issues are in the first place, but in terms of the challenges that you encounter along the way, can you help us understand what some of them are?
Yeah, there's a number of challenges. One is, of course, in some cases, and I'll talk about health search in particular, and one is, of course, people are not used to finding information on the internet for health. For instance, in the US and in other countries, people go readily, if you have a cold or sniffles or runny nose, they will type it into search, and then they'll say, oh, you may have the flu, or you may have some other virus that's going around. But in a lot of countries and other countries, we found that users don't as readily go to search for information as they do elsewhere. So that was one thing, is how do you then make people aware that they can find all this information? So we've launched new products like Google Go, for instance, which actually prompts the user to the types of information that they can search for on the internet and then we, of course, work with local partners to get that data in order to launch services that are relevant to local markets. So there are always issues that are particular to markets, but we also find that working with local partners and understanding users in different locales helps us build better products for users.
Now, for the products, the one that you did with the health sector, how significant was it? And in terms of how the kind of impact it had eventually?
So the product that we did on search, this has been almost 5 years of work on that, was very important because people would go to search for their symptoms, and oftentimes they would, because the human mind has a way of always saying, well, pain in the knee, I must have a stroke or cancer or something like that. So it was really important for us to make people realize that they don't always have the worst disease on the planet, and how to show search results so that the most relevant and the most prevalent information was presented first. So let me give you an example. So a lot of times, I'll give you a very clear example. What happened is when Ebola was spreading, a lot of people in New York and in various other parts of the world were searching for fever and cold, and the first result that would come up is Ebola. And obviously they didn't have Ebola. So we then realized that we need to make the results specific to the area, specific to the prevalence of the disease, and which is specific to the likelihood that those particular symptoms would actually match to a disease. And most times in most other parts of the world it was flu and not Ebola. And so we tried to make the search results quite much less scary than they were. So in terms of the impact, we hope we've had a good impact by doing this, so that people actually have good, relevant and correct information for the searches that they are issuing on Google search. And it's hard to quantify, but we also know that, you know, through studies that we've actually decreased the scary factor of health searches.
Oh, that's remarkable. Well, that's for health, and that's amazing. So what else you have your eyes on? What's on your radar sector that you think that you could have perhaps something of that kind in terms of impact?
Yes, I mean, there are many areas that we can look to. I mean, health is not done yet. You know, health obviously is really important, and we've also found now that our artificial intelligence and our machine learning technologies are able to make diagnoses of diseases quite on par with doctors. And so one of the big things that we are looking into with our research team is how do you bring these technologies to people who don't have access to doctors. So that's another area that we are looking into to see how we can, you know, our diabetic retinopathy work, which takes images of the retina and then predicts whether a person has retinopathy or not, is very, very useful in countries where, you know, food and diet habits have changed. People have become diabetics and now they're getting diseases like retinopathy, but they don't go to doctors until it's too late. So it's important for us to make these capabilities very affordable, very available, and to be able to predict with, you know, good reliability whether they have retinopathy or not. And this is something that we really care for. Education is another area that we'd like to look into. Jobs is another one. People in these countries are looking for jobs. A lot of people are migrating to the cities and are looking for jobs. So Google Job Search makes it that much easier for them to find jobs. So while of course we are a search company first and foremost, and we believe in improving access to information and making it universally accessible, we are also looking at particular areas where people are searching for information and making those results that much better and more useful for them.
I mean, access, obviously, that's absolutely important, because I'm thinking if someone needs access to the internet, but then you look at that particular area, maybe in a developing country somewhere, a developing region somewhere in Cambodia or somewhere in Indonesia somewhere, yes, and they cannot have that access because, I mean, broadband penetration is low or
yes,
very poor.
Yes.
And you know, I'm just wondering, so how do you overcome those kinds of barriers?
You bring up a really good point. What we've noticed is that in developed markets like Europe and the US, a lot of the data services are accessed over broadband. Whereas in other markets, because broadband penetration is low, a lot of these services are accessed over mobile networks, over cellular data. But cellular data tends to be unaffordable and expensive, and so people limit the amount that they use of cellular data, and that of course limits their access to information. So we thought that if we could make public Wi-Fi high quality, affordable, and free in this case, and available to a lot more people, then people would have good access to information on the internet. So access is of course at the bottom of everything. If people aren't able to access and get good internet connectivity, they cannot have access to all the applications they need in order to make their lives better, whether it's educational content or it's health content, whether it's just entertainment content, anything else. So access is really at the foundation of everything.
Now, still in line with that, I mean, for the Google station, you've done that in India, Thailand, Mexico, and I know that perhaps for each country the experience was different, but perhaps they have one or two themes that run across that are similar, or that run across basically. Could you just share the experience, maybe the most remarkable, if you will, of the experience of the country?
Yes, I mean, I'm going to talk about it. I mean, there are hundreds of stories that we hear where people did not even have access to any kind of connectivity are now finding that they can get information that they needed at these public hotspots. I mean, we've seen that in Thailand. There was a wonderful story of this boy who got lost. He ran away from home, and 16 or 17 or some large number of years later, he's able to find his home using Google Maps, and then he goes and he's reunited with his father. Another story is of a porter, a baggage porter in a railway station in India, and he wanted to join the civil services, which I'm sure you're familiar with here, which are considered very prestigious jobs, but he didn't have access to get the study materials and the examination, and he studied using public Wi-Fi, and he passed the exam and he got himself a government job. I mean, there are many, many such stories that we hear where people are able to get the information they need because access is now free in many locations.
Now, some people might ask, why is Google doing this?
Well, I mean, we fundamentally believe that people should have access, and we also notice that when access is affordable, a lot of people use services for multiple things, whether it's government services or finding prices of crops, finding colleges for their children, all kinds of information, and that makes their lives so much better. So yes, of course, that's been our mission from day one, is to make information universally accessible and useful, and we then continue on this mission by actually providing people the access to that information to improve their lives.
Now, we also know, because studies also tell us that when countries who have a high usage of internet, they end up having higher GDPs. They're more economically buoyant as it were. So for these countries, are you looking to see how economically better off they are? After that, do you see the impact already, or is something that's ongoing, and perhaps after a while you can go back and say, okay, let's see what the impact this has made. What's the difference?
Yes, I think that's again very important, because I think the access projects have mostly been focused on cities. So we are also interested in bringing access to rural areas, because those people could benefit from it a lot. And I'll tell you one story. I was in the state of Andhra Pradesh in India, and they showed a video of this man. We had gone to a rural village and given him a phone and had him watch a video on the phone, and his eyes lit up like it was something magical for him. So there are still many, many millions of people who don't know anything about the internet, or who don't have the opportunity to get access, and so I think that's also very, very important to us.
Do you think we're still scratching the surface? I mean, it's amazing that, here in Nigeria, we have local farmers. Many of them now use phones.
Yes.
They get information about seeds from the government for those who participate in government programs, information on seeds and fertilizer.
Yes.
But there's still some parts in the world where, like you said, the farmers his eyes just lit up when he saw a phone.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, how much more work do we need to do to
we need to do many, many years of work. There's two pieces of it. One is, of course, the phones themselves, and a lot of people in many parts of the world can't afford a smartphone. We think everybody has smartphones because we are in the city and we have access to everything, but a lot of people aren't able to even buy low-end smartphones, so they buy feature phones, and on feature phones, you can't really do very much because it's just so difficult. But in India, we, along with the partner Jio, we launched a smart feature phone which has, among other applications, it has search, it has YouTube, it has maps, and it also has the assistant. And the usage of that has been absolutely incredible, to the point that we were astounded. And there's so much of a hunger, there's so much of a need for these services, that if we make it accessible to them and we give them platforms on which they can access all the information they need, people just jump on it. It blows you away. And these people are often first-time internet users, and they get access to YouTube, and on YouTube they're watching, of course, their favorite movies and songs and so on, but they're also watching educational content. They are looking at recipes, they are looking at dress patterns. A lot of the women that we are finding in these rural areas, they find it very easy to talk to their phones and get access to all kinds of information. And it's hard to predict because they make it part of their lives. And it's hard for me to say, well, they're watching movies, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. They do what they care about, and that's been the most heartening and most inspiring part of our journey.
That was Anjali Joshi, Google's Vice President for Product Management.